Hi, everyone. Hello, hello. Welcome to SoDA Series Live. Sadly, this is our final one for the year. Right, Tom?
But yeah, I can't believe it. It's December.
I know.
December,
Crazy.
It seems nuts.
But I'm super excited. Today, we have some amazing guests lined up, and we're doing things a little different than normal. We have two panelists joining from two different SoDA member agencies, and Tom will introduce them in just a minute. But first, for those joining us for the first time, SoDA Series Live is a collaboration between the Adobe XD team and SoDA, the Society of Digital Agencies. And each month we come together to bring you candid, in-depth discussions with agency founders and creative leaders from all over the world. Our goal here is to help keep you informed of some of the key trends and topics helping to shape and influence the industry. So we sure hope that you enjoy today's conversation focused largely around design. So before we get started, I'm Kristen Bell from the Strategic Development team here at Adobe, and I'm joined by Tom Beck, Executive Director of SoDA. Hey, Tom.
Hey, Kristen.
We're your kind of behind the scenes hosts for the event. But Tom, for those joining for the first time, or maybe even those joining and less familiar with SoDA, tell us a little about SoDA as an organization.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Tom Beck, Executive Director at SoDA. And SoDA is a global community and network for founders and owners of digital agencies and design studios. We have about 95 member companies across 20 countries. And really the mission of our organization is to use the community as a peer collaboration and knowledge sharing platform so that each of our members can become a little more connected, a little more supported in growing and running their business. And we've been around for about almost 13 years now.
Wow.
And it's just a privilege and an honor to work with these founders and agency leaders across the world who are just creating great companies, great cultures, and putting amazing work out into the world. And more grateful for Adobe and the XD team. As I've said before, Adobe's been a partner and supporter of this organization since the very beginning. And just like it seems weird that it's already December this year, it seems very weird that it's been 13 years, Kristen.
Right?
I can't even believe it, but it's been a wonderful ride.
I remember the beginning days. It's so crazy to see how far we've come. Yeah. But thank you. I mean, I've thoroughly enjoyed working with you guys, as you know, and looking forward to what we have in store for next year, which is more of this. Super excited. And I can honestly say, I think this is one of my favorite collaborations that we've done. So I'm looking forward to building on this into 2022. So anyway, maybe more on that later. But to start things off, we'd like to introduce the guests for today's session. And first up is Talon Wadsworth. He's principal designer here at Adobe and a big industry advocate in design, founder of Adobe XD. We could go on and on. But thank you, Talon, for partnering with us on these sessions. It's super fun to see your passion come out in the conversation, your passion for your craft come out in the conversation. And I'm sure anyone who hasn't already seen Talon in one of these sessions will see that today again. So thank you.
Thanks, Kristen. Always a pleasure to be here. Like the fact that my job is to get to talk to designers and think about design and process and how it all works is just kind of the best, really, honestly. Like, this is just why I love my job. So always happy to be here and really love all the conversations we've had and looking forward to this one today. So.
Yeah, me too. So Tom, do you want to introduce our SoDA guests?
Yeah, for sure. And but first, I will +1 those comments. It's been such a pleasure to work with you on these this year, Talon, and
thanks, Tom.
Really appreciate you guiding these discussions. I know we've gotten a lot out of it in the SoDA community, and we just really appreciate working with you. So
thanks for the opportunity, you two, honestly. So
our two guests today are exceptional, and we're bringing Chris Huban, who is the Executive Creative Director of Product at Big Spaceship. And I believe you're calling in from the New York, Brooklyn area, but I didn't confirm that, I guess. I just assumed since that's where Big Spaceship is located. But Chris will be joining us, as well as then Henry Daubrez, who is the CEO and Chief Design Officer at Dogstudio in Namur, Belgium. And I've known Henry for the past 4 or 5 years through the SoDA community as well. And it's just a privilege to have both Chris and Henry on this conversation today. We appreciate you being here with us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so before Kristen and I will drop off, but just a couple quick logistics for those of you on the stream today. Kristen and I will be interacting within the comment thread in LinkedIn. So if you, first of all, please introduce yourself. We love to see who's on the call and where you're from. But even more importantly, feel free to make comments and pose questions along the way. We'll monitor that. We'll monitor the comment thread, and then we'll get those questions teed up to Talon, Henry, and Chris along the way. So without further ado, we'll turn it back over to Talon, Chris, and Henry, and have a great conversation today, guys.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Kristen.
Thanks, Tom. Great. Wow. Chris, Henry, great to see you again. Really excited for our conversation today. Yeah, thanks for being with us. Really excited to have you.
Ditto.
Thank you.
For the opportunity. Yeah, excited to be here.
Just to kind of tee up this conversation today, one of my favorite things to do is to really think about, again, like where we've been as designers and kind of like where we're going. And so hopefully today we can kind of, we'll tee up some questions and hopefully get the chat involved here to really, kind of do like a little bit of a retrospective and then maybe a little forecasting into the future. So this is kind of a nice, year-end roundup. I mean, this has been a crazy, almost going on like 2 years. I know for myself, the Adobe offices shut down in March of 2019 now? I don't know. Time just feels like it just got like really like stretched and compressed at the same time. Like did it pass? I don't know. So but here we are, and I'm really excited to talk to you both. Let's start here. I want to to set the foundation here for our conversation today. So Chris, why don't you start us off by just telling us a little bit about yourself and kind of like what your role is at Big Spaceship.
Yeah, sure. Well, excited to be here and good to see you again. So, and thanks. I'm calling in from Brooklyn. Yes, just to clarify, remotely from my studio in my house. I'm the executive creative director of product at Big Spaceship. I joined in August, so I'm rounding out month 5 and the end of this year. So it's been a very exciting journey thus far this year. The last 2 years have been incredibly challenging, adventurous, exciting, stressful, all of the feels across the board. But my role coming in is really kind of about 4 things. It's obviously overseeing and envisioning not just products, but also brand experiences at Big Spaceship. But thinking about kind of 4 areas, if you will. One is about establishing a vision for what products, but more broadly experience can be and means today, and then looking forward into the future. It's about establishing a structure that's going to let that vision thrive in not just the teams that we have, but also in the work that we're creating. It's also about looking for those individuals to bring into that team and pull into our family to help bring that work to life. And then it's also about thinking about our future, our road for growth, and where we're looking to grow, not just as a company and with the industries and the clients that we work with, but also as individuals, as designers, as more broadly creatives, and doing that together.
Yeah, and I feel like there's a couple things in there that's going to be like an underlying theme of today that we're going to talk about. It's really about the trend lines of like experience and what that means now, as opposed to what that's meant over the last few years, and maybe how it's going to continue to grow and develop over time. So, all right, looking forward to digging into that. Henry, tell us a little bit about yourself. Set the stage here for us. Tell us, about you and your role and your work there at Dogstudio.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And thank you for the introduction. I'm CEO and hands-on designer / CCO at Dogstudio. We are, it's these days it's even harder to define agencies because the lines are blending a lot. But I would say we're more of a design and experiential studio with a focus on building brands and product experiences, leaving a mark. And I know that we all are thriving to leave a mark. But I would say that over the years, building a website became more of a commodity, right? Like you have so many tools right now enabling you to do this. And so we try to find this kind of a niche, which is like those persons who actually need some very specific needs, both in terms of return, but also in terms of stories we want to tell. So on our side, it's going to translate towards the right use of visual design, like getting to details, having a strong layer of UX, but also and often lately build universes which could be like 3D or whatever, but things which are going to try to immerse people, even though we're like obviously at a distance. So yeah, that's pretty much I would say our mission. And in terms of location, so as Tom said, I'm currently in Belgium, but because our company was founded in Belgium years and years ago. But what's interesting today is that we are really divided. We have kind of a hybrid model between offices and people being remote. And so today we have teams in Mexico City, Chicago, Amsterdam, here in Belgium, but also people in Paris, Porto, Wichita, you name it. So it's also exciting times for us to see this grow and to tap into that talent.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely another thing that I think we're going to dig into, just like how work has changed and how we've really been able to broaden the net when it comes to the talent that's sort of on tap and available, to digital design studios kind of all over the world. And there's kind of an interesting thing I want to start off with here, because I was, as you both were talking, the Society of Digital Agencies, and we talked about digital work, but do you feel like that's almost like kind of an artifact of the past in a way, where agencies in the past really had to like signify digital as a focus, but now when so much of the work is digital, like how does that terminology fit with you now? Again, like most of the work that we're doing is all digital. Again, is there a difference between a normal agency and a digital agency?
Chris, you want to go? I can go ahead.
Go for it. Yeah.
You're unmuted. Go ahead.
So yeah, I would say what's interesting is and something we discussed last time we spoke, but I think it's the sense of literacy of different clients and how the market is evolving kind of brought consistency towards all those products. So indeed, you used to have a lot of an offline campaign, which was I would say at the very beginning, often in a clumsy way, like translated, like just make it digital because it's it doesn't matter. And today, as you mentioned, like everything is digital, so those channels are like the main channels of communication, and this kind of trend kind of inverted. And what's interesting in that is that we notice that our clients kind of geared up and build those strong in-house departments with people coming from agency sector and the other way around. So it's interesting to see how agency and client side are blurring as well, because people keep on exchanging sites. And so my understanding is that we have much more consistency today because we have much more people who actually have this kind of a digital literacy, because either they're younger and they just grew up in that environment, or they had this experience going from one side to the other one, and now they're directly working with the clients, which is really different from being a consultant and just getting there for a few weeks and then moving to something else.
Yeah. So really, again, as a signifier of, say, experience or expertise within a medium or a field, and as you're saying, like this has kind of been inverted, where the experience that we both forward the expertise of the designers and the craftspeople, and then also the experience of the users or the viewers or the customers, as it were, and like that's all now shifted, and sort of our main form is digital communication, and sort of instead of we're just immersed in it now, and so that has all of our expertise has grown, like as you're saying, like I remember sort of again, I think we were probably right on the cusp of that shift where we started like I remember taking classes in school when I first started, where I was still like doing like offset press and like learning about that, but at the same time we were also creating websites and making Flash experiences, and so like that was like right at that shift, and now everything is sort of really focused on digital output.
Yeah, felt like a natural progression too. I remember that. I went to Pratt years ago. I won't date myself, but I remember, they had a web design class, and I thought, oh, it's that. I'd originally gone to school thinking I'd be an illustrator. I'd go work for Disney one day, and I got out with a BFA in ComD and a focus in graphic design. And I remember maybe it was like my junior year, I took a web design class, and the first semester was really just about like IPs and just the internet, the background, the mechanics, the under the hood stuff. And it was like, oh God, why do I need to know this? This is not design. This is so boring. And then it wasn't until the second semester that we actually started getting into design. And I walked out of that course talking to the dean of design at Pratt and saying, you need to make this not an elective. This should be a mandatory course for the content department, because this is the future. This is where we're going to head. And it felt like a natural progression from print to digital, just kind of seamless. And I think they're sort of on both sides. I think as creatives, you know, when you think about the programs and applications that we were designing with, a lot of it started with things like Photoshop, Quark, Express back in the day that were very print focused by nature. And I think when you think about the evolution of products and tools that we work with today, and I see us, we'll talk about it probably later, but as we head more and more into this sort of no code universe, right, where we're putting development more into that visual realm, it just feels like a natural progression of creation where we're actually starting to design not by force fitting things that were built for the print industry for the digital, but also starting to create actual digital native tools that allow us to create in the space we're designing for. And I think for the brand side of the fence, it's similar, right? When I was at Spotify, I think one of the most interesting takeaways that I had learned in my time on advertising when I consulted there for the year was the sort of idea that like it's always been this visual space. Like branding has always been visual, right? With like radio and television. And I think it was like Bulova watches in like the 1941 World Series. I think it was like the first commercial or something. And I think people understood that, right? And it was like something that you could touch. Brand was like a GE light bulb. It was a Cadillac that you drove, right? And then I think that people understood like the importance of visual branding and branding in general. And then I think digital branding, when that happened, right? The responsive web, the mobile revolution in 07, right? All those things, I think, changed the game for a lot of people. And it's still, I think, why we continue to see responsive websites as being in need, right? Like vinyl will never go away, just as like web design will never really go away. I think people having a hard time grasping how their brand should exist in the digital space when they've spent decades understanding how it should exist in that print space, right? Yeah. And I think at Spotify, which was interesting, was talking about selling the opportunity in the audio space. And I think some brands who struggle to understand what branding means in that digital space, it might just be too far of a leap for them. Like sonification, right, and those kinds of things. But that seems like a natural progression, and I think that we will be continually heading there, which is very exciting.
That's really exciting. I really totally agree with that. And I think, the best designers, right, the ones who really understood, from in a native way, the sort of the medium, right, the language of the medium, and then utilize their skills and their knowledge to then apply that to client problems, right? And so like this sort of like what does brand mean anymore? Henry, I don't know if you've maybe thought about this, like what is brand mean now in the realm of sort of digital experience, maybe building on some of the things Chris was saying, like you I remember we talked yesterday about your team creating a virtual event space, right? So like what does brand start to mean now, across all these digital channels and across sort of not just the visual experience, but maybe the sort of audio experience or maybe even other sort of sensory experiences to sort of really flesh out something like a virtual space.
Yeah. So indeed, yeah. When we last discussed, I did mention we collaborate last year with the Tomorrowland Festival, which is initially a Belgian festival, but which is pretty well known. And that was interesting because this is typically a really strong brand in the fashion that they're consistent from A to Z. Everything they do with like a sense of like a sense of detail and trying to make the experience as good as it can. This is why the tickets are just selling in a matter of minutes every year. It's just because this festival is so well organized, like obviously the curation, but also people know that once they get their tickets, it's just going to be smooth from the start to the end. And what's interesting with those kind of experiences and when those brands reach out is that they have something really strong, but something which is really physical, something which from its very core, it's not a digital brand. It's not, obviously they're going to communicate over social networks or like have a digital communication, but then the experience in itself is something which is really physical, really, really intimate, something that people have to experience physically. So they reached out because they indeed like pretty much everyone last year they tried to figure out how to navigate through the pandemic. So they're like, maybe we should consider having a digital event, and what does it mean, and how would it translate? And that's interesting because this kind of feeling of what the brand is something which is difficult to translate, but at the same time is going to, if you take enough distance between what they try to convey and who they are and the values they stand for, then it's easier to apply it to an actual product. So in this case, for a virtual event, we knew that some elements are really part of their universe, I would say, or their core values. So I mentioned the sense of detail. I mentioned how experience should be smooth, how things should be simple for users, but also how this kind of fantasy, which is always visible in everything they build, something which we had to bring on board. So that was interesting because that was kind of bringing a new side to their existing brand, creating what's digital, but also it's kind of opening a door for the future because we don't. So we've been doing a lot of virtual events in between. That was one of them. We worked the World Expo in Dubai to create a replica of the physical site. All of this are, and this even more for Expo, those are meant to be an extra, like I wouldn't say a bonus, but more of a different side of the experience. And this is why it's interesting, coming back full circle to what you mentioned for a brand, we see a lot of interest into not only communicating over the whatever network they have to communicate or whatever channel they need to communicate, but also see how digital can reinforce the physical experience and how we can start creating those kind of a hybrid experiences. And to wrap up on that, once we finished the Tomorrowland, we were like first virtual event, we were looking into what people were mentioning about it, and there's one single comment which really stood out for us. It was someone saying, "Hey, I'm disabled. Normally, I cannot go to this festival. It's impossible for me. The trip is just too heavy. And thanks to the experience now, I could have a glimpse of where it is, and like the experience this with other people, share the experience, like discuss, see because we had during the festival some video channels where people could actually show them partying in different places. So all those elements were enabling people to connect. And someone just under was commenting saying, "Hey, I feel you. I'm visually impaired. This is also really difficult for me to do this." So what was interesting is that it brought a level of accessibility that we didn't really anticipate from the start. And this is where we think a place for those kind of hybrid models where brands can exist on different channels, because you can include a lot more people as you go versus just doing what you always have been doing, which is going to close a lot of doors.
Yeah.
So
yeah, definitely. And I think what I really pull from, I think what you're saying is that, like, and with Chris, is that experience now is really that full expression of brand, right? And you mentioned like the values and the principles and the ideals and the aspirations of a brand can really be expressed, through all these sort of channels, these digital channels that the potential users or customers are sort of picking up on and using, and that's leading them kind of like through this like broader system again, which is that expression of the company and its brand, and so I think that's, I was one of the trends lines, I want to sort of dig into that a little bit more, like what other trend lines have you seen in particular over the last year? Is there anything, any type of work that you've seen really accelerate, over say like the past year or so with the pandemic, or in the last couple of years? Like, what are some of the things that you've seen and it really maybe even changed the way that the agency, the studio works, or the type of work you're doing? Chris, have you sort of noticed anything that you're doing differently now than you were say a year or two ago?
Yeah, I mean, I could start it off. I think, COVID undoubtedly has changed everything, right? Everybody's been impacted to different altitudes. And I think we look through those altitudes at a lot of the businesses that are coming in and that we're speaking to, whether they're long-term relationship like a Starbucks or a JetBlue who we work with, or brand new businesses that we're partnering with like a Lightrix or Masterclass. And, obviously the thing that I think remains the same is that, like, everybody kind of talks about transformation and the needs of business and the users and all these things. But I think that we understand now more than ever that those things are way more bespoke to where each of those particular businesses are in their journeys, because, right, like transformation isn't a turnkey solution. We know what it means, right? But what does it actually mean for you as a business? And so I think COVID shifted landscapes across industry dramatically. And I think that we talked about this the other day. I think for us, I've noticed kind of two things happening. There are those businesses, like a lot of SMBs wound up sharing some of the spotlight that's been usually reserved for enterprise businesses, which is great. I've seen a lot of terrible commercials and like bad design, which I love, because I said it earlier, like I love bad design. I think it's phenomenal. So, you know, it's great to see that limelight that's usually reserved for these multi-million-dollar campaigns being now more accessible to smaller businesses that are trying to let the world know that they're still available, they're still around. I think we're seeing a shift into digital in a stronger way. If you've been a brick and mortar business that's relied solely on foot traffic to your physical space, and you haven't really been paying attention to that e-com, you know, that digital interface with your customer base, you may be in trouble if you haven't been addressing that. And if you weren't, you're certainly addressing it now, right? And I think that we've seen that kind of shift. And one other thing I've seen happening is, as we're kind of thinking about what like going more upstream means for a lot of people, specifically around businesses, we've noticed that it's sort of been a time where some businesses have been able to take this time to step back and reflect and think about where they are, what was that 5-year plan, how has what's been happening changed that, if at all. And we've seen some businesses, that 5-year plan's been cut in half. They've been able to accelerate. Some people have put their product roadmaps on hold. Some people have been focusing on, I think we've seen a rise in ads and a kind of stalling on some product in certain areas. And so with those particular businesses that have actually done a little bit of that self-reflection, the questions that we're being approached with aren't so much, we're not really sure what we need to do. For those businesses who have taken advantage of the time to think about how their business is being impacted and what they need to be doing, the questions are a little bit of more like, can you validate what we think we need to be doing? Help us identify what the first step is and then where to go from there. It's not as like specific to like necessarily like product road mapping, but I think it's way more strategic. It's almost like a strategic reset and a validation, and then like, let's go and be creative. So there's still very much of that desire for, show me that far future. So much has changed in the last 4 weeks than has in a very long time in the design industry, that businesses are sort of kind of like all over the place now. And that starting line is kind of changed, and it's like an uncertain starting line, and everybody's trying to understand where now to go from here and prepare for this sort of next stage of this pandemic.
So you'd say maybe there's a little more awareness in terms of like what they know they need to be able to do, and then they're looking to bring on that expertise to really help them execute like on that vision. And that's going to be maybe more of a long-term engagement, like something that's going to be much more integrated than kind of like, here, just throw the, you know, here's the solution devoid of any context, and then just like throw it over the fence and, you know, stick it up on a wall and see if it works. You know, like this is a much more thoughtful, much more, you know, collaborative engagement, as it were.
Yeah, and Henry, I'll cue you up because you said something really interesting. You know, I think that we'll continue to see that it's sort of like less of these one and done engagements and more of these long-term integrated relationships that grow for the long term, right? It's about investing in each other and really understanding the business and understanding not just like the needs of the business, but also like the needs of the people the business is serving and how those teams on both sides are working together.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it's interesting you bring that, because I would also add that one thing which also changed and which is reinforcing as we go is the level of transparency which is needed from both sides. So a lot of our clients are in the entertainment industry or culture industry, which were really impacted for some of them during the COVID. So obviously, as you mentioned, Chris, they need to step back and to rethink about what they're really expecting from their business and how it would translate to a different context, or how to move from there. And that was interesting because it brought a lot of, I would say, different conversations at the table, but also a kind of vulnerable side to them. Like they had to be pretty upfront regarding the business and what's working, what's not working. And I don't think we would have had this level of, you know, openness and transparency if not for what happened, because it kind of pushed everyone to, you know, like in a corner, and you had to decide how you wanted to evolve, and if it made sense for your brand, it made sense for your business. And so we always try to build on our relationships, and I mean, I would say like that's just good business for anyone, but also because we really do believe in the human interactions we have with your clients, because this is when you started making the best work. And we did notice that this kind of a fast-paced evolution for the last 2 years, because a lot of subjects were brought to the table and a lot of evolutions, and the way we interacted needed this level of transparency even more, because like being at a distance, you don't have those kind of meeting after meeting after meeting. I think there's a lot of the fat which has been trimmed out of the discussions and out of the interactions we had, both internally with the team and with the clients. And it's been difficult to adapt, I think, at the beginning, but now we do see that there's a lot more interesting discussions from I mean, at the very end, because basically we took out all that fat, all those unnecessary points which were maybe sometimes clogging the debates. So yeah, I think at the end, most likely it's for the best, but that was interesting to see, because it's been, as you said, Chris, it's been so intense over 2 years.
Yeah. Do you so sort of tracking some of these changes and these shifts in terms of the type of work, the amount of work, the type of engagements? Has that even seen has it necessitated a shift in the roles that designers play, or the skill sets that they have, or even like the roles that you have prioritized, say, bringing into the company? Yeah, anything on that? Like, how are these changes and these trend lines changed how designers work, and what skills they need to have?
I can speak broadly about a big spaceship, in my personal vision and perspective that I'm bringing is really about a wider aperture and redefining the way that we think about design. I think we spend a lot of time in our industry redefining words, and we're just convoluting everything. And when I think about design, for me, it's not just about aesthetics, right? Sure, we could talk about aesthetic trends. Is it the 90s? Probably the 70s. Millennial pink, bold colors. I think purple is going to be next year's color, says somebody out in the color world. But I think that when you think about design more broadly as like the process of creation, you can open up that understanding to a wider audience that brings in other disciplines, from strategy to business engagement to engineering, product management, and content, data, all those people together. And I think what you wind up looking for are more designers who think more generally about how all of those things work together. And so for me and my team, what we're really looking for isn't necessarily, I think we're looking for two things. One, we're still looking for those specific interests and passions, right? If somebody is looking to be that principal designer and they just want to focus on honing that craft, designing, mentoring others on how to be better with a specific skill, whether it's soft or hard, that they have, that's great. And I still want that. But I think also it's that broader understanding where we have user experience strategists that understand both branding, but also understand the design aesthetics, so that they understand how they're working with data and research to inform design decisions that are often going to be built by engineering. Or, I think we're going to see a rise in creative technologists, right? Carnegie Mellon is like pumping out incredible talent. For anybody who's looking for CTs, Carnegie Mellon, shout out. And I think that's sort of like that overlap of creativity and technology, and that fusing of two. So I think in looking at teams, I think for me, at least, it's looking for people who have both interests. I think having that more broader interest down to a more specific passion, and then sort of bringing those teams closer together versus keeping them sort of separated, like we have traditionally, like UX versus design. We plop in product and no one knows how to like transition, right? Which is where we kind of are.
Yeah. So it seems like a lot of times in the trend lines in the industry, in terms of jobs and job codes and job titles, is really a trend towards like contraction and expansion, where you really have almost like a commodification of the role. I need a specific person along production line to do this specific role, and once you sort of have that established, then there's a shift in technology, there's a shift in medium of communication, and now you're sort of prioritizing again those more holistic sort of skill sets, right? And we've seen that, right? Like you're saying, like people trend to not call themselves UX designers, now they're product designers. They're trying to, I think designers are always trying to sort of get at like the application of skills is much broader than just putting pixels on a screen, right? And really trying to like tell that story of value, you know. Yeah, Henry, what you know, if you're out there, you know, looking for, you know, prospective sort of like hires, like what skill sets are you prioritizing now, you know, as you're thinking about the work that you've been doing over the last year or two, and think about the work you're going to be doing into the future, you know, what things are you prioritizing now as you're bringing new people on from potentially anywhere in the world?
Yeah. So to bounce on what Chris said, I think there's two sides to it. There's a side of what we need in terms of skills. So we've been doing a lot of WebGL lately. So obviously, like 3D designers are out on the market. Even more with the big rise of NFTs, seems like they're you know, like finally, maybe for some, getting paid for the work they've been doing for years. So now it's even more difficult to hire them as part of a team because they're better off as being independent, which I totally get.
Interesting.
But you have obviously like creative developers and creative technologists are pretty big on the market, and seems to be you know, I mean, like an interesting position to get for the near future, and most likely for way beyond that. But then I would say the second side of the discussion is more we don't look as much as at those skills as we look at the human skills we can find and how people are interacting together. So even more now being most of the time being remote, it's even more important for us to make sure that not only people get along, but also have those kind of human skills, social skills, which are going to not only enable them to work as a team, but also to interact with the clients. Not having this kind of a physical contact is not easy, and we did notice passing on some people who on paper were the best profiles we could get for a given role, just because we didn't see a team fit. We just didn't feel like something was okay. As that's complicated, right? Because it's not a list we can just put check marks and saying this is okay, this is okay, this is not okay. At some point it comes down to how do you feel with those those individuals, like would you feel they would work? So there's a bit of it which is still pretty subjective, but I would say so far so good. But so I would say even more now in the future we're going to look at how people are going to interact, how are they going to present themselves. As you said, Chris, I think the job of designer now, or if I take just design, is way beyond. I mean, I started 15 years ago. I think I could design the website and then code it myself, and it was still CSS2 back then. Technically, a lot of people are still doing that today, but then they need so many more tools and so much more knowledge that what it wasn't needed back then. So the ecosystem in itself became increasingly complex, and we're looking at people who can grasp it, not that they do from the get-go, but more that there's kind of a mindset that they're not only eager to learn, but also they can juggle with concept pretty quickly and get into anything. And I think those are the ones who are going to really stand out more than having the most amazing portfolio.
Yeah.
Can I add to that, Talon, actually? Because I love what you're saying.
Sure.
And we talked about this yesterday. Like, I think it's 100%, right? Like, we're looking for like a broadened understanding. And I think that, when we talk about product, are you a product designer as example, right? Like, I don't think that it's about whether you understand how to use Figma or you can prototype, right? Like, we were talking about this the other day. I think if you are interested in understand how things work and are able to sort of like put pieces together and in your mind visualize the workings and the mechanics of an idea and understand that collaboration means working together, and you think like an engineer, you're probably a product designer, right? We can teach you how to prototype. We can teach you how to use any
tool.
But it's a lot harder to teach somebody how to like visualize a process or like think 20 years out and then like bring you an idea with like the understanding of how this might happen and then this change might happen, which will create this opportunity down the line. It's harder to see that,
and really like, and even like synthesizing learnings from say research, right? Or synthesizing data points, from analytics, and really thinking very deeply and critically about that bigger picture and about how all the pieces then start to fit together. right? Like those are the skill sets. And there's been a couple of questions here I think that are related to this, and I think we kind of answered. So Darren DeCourcy, who's in the chat with us today, he asked about that need to specialize versus prioritize, say, maybe a broader sort of view of understanding when it comes to, again, like all the different pieces at play or all the different people you need to work with to then go and execute on a digital project. So Darren, I hope you said, I think there's a good sense of that here. I think not putting words in Chris or Henry's sort of mouths here, but saying that like really, someone who's well-rounded, who can think very critically, who can work and communicate with collaborators, is going to be prioritized, say, over someone who's a deep specialist. And those specialists are going to be needed, but those specialists, might have a more limited role and maybe a limited ceiling, right, in terms of like design and the application of design more broadly. The other question here, and Sophia Zukova, she asked kind of two related questions. I mean, again, I think maybe we all have a sense that like, the academic world maybe lags behind, but do you feel like that those designers who are there, who are maybe going to school or maybe, participating in different programs, do you feel like that world is keeping up with the things that the work that you're doing and the things that you're seeing in the design industry?
The conversation. Talk about it for days.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm going to jump quickly on that one because I come from a computer graphics school with little to no teachers who actually worked like had an experience in the market, which was interesting because I learned a lot regarding using the tools and like whatever could be taught as on the academics point of view. But then I felt like when I started working that not only the pace was really different, which is something which I'm always wondering, like it seems like school will give like a lot of time to figure out a lot of assignments, but like once they get in the market, it's much more complicated because things move fast. But what I do notice today is the big difference we have between those schools who are just teaching something and the ones who are consistently. I'm thinking, for example, of it's called Gobelin in Paris. It's a school which relying mostly on inviting teachers from the outside, or like inviting professionals from the outside, and the entire course, I would say a core concept is bringing those people from the outside. It's also interesting because they're going to teach differently. They're going to have a different point of view, but also they're going to constantly keep in touch with what's done at that very given moment. And I do believe that's the very best model right now because they not only they do this, but also students are getting to. I mean, so internships are divided. So every year there's a long internship, and it's what they call alternance. So basically, it's like they work part time in the company and they go to school part time, and that's part of the course. It's part of the process, and it does seem once again I'm. And Chris, most likely you know better, but like I don't know as much in the US how it works, but I know this one's working really well, and we have in our team a lot of members from the Gobelin because those guys are ready. They get out of school and they're really ready because they've been working for years, but also they've been taught by peers, by people who actually collaborate with us every day. And this feels like is the best way to approach teaching today.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the school that I chose to go to here in the Bay Area, California College of the Arts, I chose because the professors were practicing designers. They worked at large agencies, they owned their own design studios, they were out there on the front lines, and they're bringing in that knowledge and that experience into the academic setting, and then really trying to build a curriculum around those personal experiences they've had in the industry, and really helping people set up for being out there in the world, and particularly working on digital products, right, and working with clients and working on the complex sort of breadth of things that we're doing as designers now. Like, it requires collaboration, and I think I really like the potential of that, being like these are people not just going to school and learning from someone with experience, but they're also getting hands-on experience, like working with all those roles and all those team members it takes to execute on a digital product or service.
Yeah, I mean, one reason I chose Pratt was because it had a global class, right? It wasn't like targeted to New York City. think it was like 70% of the class that I was in, or the school. I think it was like 5,500 kids when I went there in the 4 years I was there. So very small, right? It's not like 30,000 kids where you can really become a name and not like a number. And I remember, it's the first time you're meeting everybody else that's like you. You're not the weirdo anymore from like your high school, right? You now found your community, that sense of belonging. And I think what was great was, for me, what really matters most is sort of like a sense of perspective, not just for me, because I think as a mentor and a leader, like I think it sort of requires providing perspective to others, not to tell them, hey, the way I'm thinking is right and you're wrong. It's more, here's how I'm viewing it. Have you ever considered this before? And maybe they can disagree, but they have an understanding of why. And I think finding all that perspective in school was great. Pratt was a very like A to D. It wasn't like A to B. It was all about out of the box thinking. But where I felt I would lacked clearly when I got out of school is I had no idea how to apply that backdoor thinking to anything concrete, right? I think Parsons does a good job of teaching that real world experience. And I think, I've taught Flash at FIT. I've, been an adjunct teacher at SVA a couple times. And, the curriculums are good. I think that, kind of back to the earlier question, like, I think that there's a divide between the education and our industry. I think, we have like 20 different names that we have for the same job title. And there's like 27 different like titles that you have to get through, which impacts retention. And so how does somebody graduating from a traditional school with a BFA get a design job as like a UI interaction designer in like, doing movies, right? Like Tron or something like that? I'm sure is very confusing for most people, right? And I think when you go to a school that sort of by nature says you're creative, you can do anything, right? It's sort of like when you're young and you get that, oh, you know how to draw, and someone gives you that blank piece of paper and they're like, draw me something. And you think about how challenging it is sometimes to like think of what to draw in that moment, right? But with a little bit more, like, draw me your favorite fruit or animal. It's still a little bit challenging, but at least you have a bit more
something to go on,
boundaries to go on. And so I think when schools can sort of further align that real world experience, bringing in teachers a bit more, connecting a bit more to our industry, I think that'll be a little bit more helpful. And, we were talking about this the other day, and I think, there's plenty of incredible talent that don't go to school, that don't have that BFA degree. And I don't think that it really matters, right? I've always been, open to hiring people who actually don't come from that traditional school background and have a degree. So, anybody who's out there watching who, doesn't have that and feels perhaps that they're being limited by that, I would assure you that I don't think that you are. And I hope you feel like that.
Yeah, I mean, we were kind of touching on this a little bit the other day, just really like the breadth of application of design now, and the opportunities that are out there and available for design and design thinking, and like there's a lot of opportunities that people wouldn't be, again, I think in an academic setting, aren't always been made aware of unless there's someone bringing in their own personal experiences. I had a lot of colleagues, or classmates myself, who came out and now all of a sudden, like they got into the tech world, where the jobs are, but then they end up finding like, well, I'm working for a company that's going to build a wearable. And now all of a sudden they're designing the UI interfaces for wearable technology, as opposed to like designing like a website, or they're now designing, for healthcare systems, right? And there's so many opportunities because everybody really is still trying to figure out, like, what does it mean to be in a digital environment, for our company, for our brand to be in a digital environment, and all the applications of that. And so, if anything, like, there's just more opportunity than there's ever been. And I think, the challenge for students is always like, well, do you know what opportunities are out there? Do you know the things that you can do with design, and how can we, do a better job of really, again, communicating those experiences and those opportunities it's not just all about, designing a web page or an e-commerce service. There's all these different types of ways to sort of, pursue design as a career.
Yeah, I would say it's the most exciting time to be a creative person, like than ever before. There's so much opportunity. There are so many tools available to us that, however you define creativity, whether you're talking about graphic design, or you're a bedroom producer making music, or you're a content creator, like it's really the most exciting time that I can think of. And, it's awesome.
Yeah.
I think access to information as well regarding this, like you have a lot of tools, but so it's much easier to learn them because you have so many platforms where you can, like watch videos or learn about how to use whatever technique. And because I remember when I started, I mean, it was much more complicated. Not only it was still at the 56K modem, so it was really slow. But so like mostly you had to print your stuff, to find someone who was like willing to write down everything which had to be done because access to video wasn't. So I mean, it was a lot of trial and error, so you can learn a lot from that. But I see how fast it is today, and how easy it is to have access to whatever you need to actually learn a new trade from one day to the other. Like as long as you have the mindset and the willingness to to get a bit miserable at the start, but to learn, it's everything is just for grabs, which is great.
Yeah. Well, we got about 10 minutes left, and of course no discussion about the future at this moment in time would be a discussion about the future if we didn't talk about some of the new technologies that are really starting to impact the digital space. Of course, the metaverse has been in the news a lot, as well as NFTs and Web 3.0 and the blockchain. And I think Darren DeCourcy had another question, which I think, Darren, we're going to answer here, because he wanted to talk about like how design is going to be changing and the types of things we're going to be doing. Have either of you kind of thought about that at all, and thought about like the application of design with these new technologies, and how you see your work changing, the work for your studio potentially changing, or just things you're excited about that you yourself want to explore? So we'll just sort of put it out there. And again, Chris, if you want to go first, or Henry, just jump in here, and we'll give a chance for both of you to answer.
Yeah. I mean, it's all I think about. It's like, as of late, the thing I think before I go to bed and like wake up thinking about is just like, it's super annoying. I think it's fascinating. I think that what's more fascinating is where we're about to head. I think that there's a lot of smoke and mirrors and a lot of confusion about like what really is the value here.
Yeah.
But I think the sort of continual emergence of virtual economies, whether utility or securities, commodities, I think the exchange value, sort of like when we see NFTs actually provide like an exchangeable service, I think that's going to be like really fascinating. I think GPT-3, like natural learning language processing, is really exciting. I think there's that app Replica that I'm kind of obsessed with, where I think it's a really interesting step towards really trying to address that more like human to human connection, which I can see in that future becoming a more human to need thing. And I think that when we think about that future, when you think about extended realities, we think about the HoloLens, right, where doctors and surgeries are able to sort of go into a room together and wear these devices where they're talking about the strategy and approach to a brain surgery before they actually work on a live patient, especially when they can now do that with other kinds of more informed AIs in that future, where they don't need to be in the same room. They can do this globally, remotely, remote surgeries. I think that kind of far future is really exciting and where I see us heading. And, I think it's super exciting. And I think that for brands who are trying to understand the sort of intersection of brand and product and how they define themselves, what does it mean to service people? I think user, product, potentially limiting things. I think if we think about people in general, experience more broadly as humans and their experience in the world, then I think we can apply all those things to the technologies that we're seeing and really be like innovating in ways we've never thought about before.
Yeah. Henry, how about you? Anything NFTs keeping you up at night? Like what's on your mind?
So yeah, actually, as a matter of fact, we do have work in the NFT field, and I mean, the entire debate around Web3 and blockchain and NFTs and everything around it, I think was more interesting than the technology in itself, or like not like taking the focus too much on how it's done, or like what's behind is more how we are back at discussing the very fabric of things like such as the internet right now, which is interesting because a lot of things that we considered like pretty static and concepts which have been the same for like decades, and now suddenly we're finding new creative ways to play on the subject. So when like and before there was a big crash. I think it was like 3 years ago when crypto had this kind of a huge surge. What was interesting is that back then there was much less applications. Like it was interesting, like in the sense of the currency, the same way you would go in the stock market. But what's interesting today is that there's so many applications and so many things which can be done with those technologies, and how it's opening a lot of new debates. So, for example, I heard recently about a DAO, so a decentralized autonomous organization, which is trying to raise the price of the carbon credits as this kind of a like a decentralized network, so that the companies and the different authorities who actually need to work with those carbon credits cannot hide behind them anymore, because as the price is getting higher, it's more difficult for them to just buy them. So it's bringing back the debate around climate and how to actually reduce your carbon footprint higher. So there's a lot of holes and gaps and everything in the way it can be done. But it's just interesting that people today are much more creative about not only making money on one side, but also how we can turn something else. So I think what's keeping me up at night right now is more this feeling of opportunities, but also new open debates on things which I thought were once again have been the same for years and years and years, and now suddenly are being fully shaken out of their comfort zone.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I think that just to build on that just a little bit, this I think feeling that I think we're seeing both online and the sort of all the creators sort of out there, like this vibe of like utilizing the technologies for the greater good to change the world for the better in some way. And so like maybe we haven't really figured it out. People are going to be the boom bust cycles of crypto and NFTs, but like that shouldn't mask the opportunity with some of the underlying technology, and that we still haven't really figured it out yet, like how the application is going to change the way we communicate, the way we interact with each other. And it's going to be designers at the forefront, creators and other creative types who are thinking very deeply about this technology that's really going to lead us to innovations that we haven't even considered yet. So that's an exciting, and I think as we sort of were talking the last little while, like a lot of exciting opportunities. It's never been a better time to be a designer, to be a creative, and to be out there thinking about these technologies and their application, for any types of sort of pursuits. So that's a great way to sort of wrap it up. Again, we only have a couple minutes left, so I just want to say thank you to you both so much. I mean, this is the way I like to spend my day, is just talking some shop and really digging into all these like really deep problems. And as Chris was saying, like not just talking about like the trends and aesthetics of design, but really talking about the application of design and how it sort of impacts our world. That's just my favorite topic. So we're gonna let Tom and Kristen wrap it up. But thank you both so much. Such a pleasure to sort of be able to meet you both and connect with you and hear the great thoughts and ideas that you shared today. So
yeah, thank you so much. It was really wonderful. Talk about it for
this is part one, right?
Yeah, part one. A lot more conversations to go.
Same here. Thank you, Tadine. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, it was a great conversation, you guys. Lots of really great comments about just thank you for the valuable discussion. So we'll have you back next year.
I'm sorry we couldn't get all the questions. Sorry, we just sort of we gotta get on a tangent and we kind of go on a thread, and it's always hard to sort of capture all those comments. So, but thanks for everybody for your questions and comments today. So sorry we didn't get to all of them.
Agreed. And everyone, feel free. I know Destiny was named Sophia. I think you both had a couple questions we didn't get to. Feel free to message me on LinkedIn, and I'll see if we can provide you some guidance or response to those questions. Happy to do that.
Yeah, for sure. Big thanks, Henry, Chris, and Talon, into the audience for joining us. I hope you guys all have a wonderful and restful holiday.
Yeah.
We'll look forward to picking up on this again in the new year. Kristen, you can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, we do plan. Well, I just want to say thank you, everyone who has joined multiple editions, I guess I'll call them, of our SoDA series live throughout the year. It's been super fun to bring this. So yeah, and thank you, Tom, for the partnership. But we do plan to be back in 2022, believe it or not. with more of these kind of design-centered conversations with creative leaders from SoDA. So our goal is really just to help continue to bring you perspectives on topics and trends that are shaping the digital design space. So feel free to follow us on LinkedIn. I don't have a specific announcement about January yet, but follow us. We will soon. And just a closing out reminder that SoDA Series Live is a collaboration between the Society of Digital Agencies and Adobe XD. You can access previous recorded sessions from the year under the video archives here on the Creative Cloud LinkedIn page. You can also access some written articles that we've done with SoDA on MXD Ideas. So check those out as well. And again, feel free to drop me a note in LinkedIn for any specific topics that you'd like to see us explore next year. And thank you everyone so much for joining. Happy holidays.
Thank you. Happy
and
holidays.
We'll see you in the new year.
Yep. We'll see you soon,
Thanks,
Kristen.
Yeah, this was so great. Bye, everyone.